What's up, guys? All right, I got to cheer from the middle. So, I want to talk to you a little bit. I mean, Jacqueline basically stole my jokes and my talking points, but that's all right. We'll recover. I want to talk to you about making change in the world, and it's very similar to what we just heard, that in order to fix the big problems that affect all of us today in 2015, we need to work together differently than we have been, and we need to work together much more quickly. This is Moroto. This is in eastern Uganda. This is a metaphor. There's a storm coming. Ha ha. This is also in Moroto. So this is in Moroto town. On the right-hand side of the photo, you see a water point. This is what UNICEF is traditionally known for. This water point and the others like it in Moroto, in this area in eastern Uganda, provide clean water to over 30,000 families. That's infrastructure. That's something we understand. There's the road, and 5 meters on the other side of the road, there were some solar panels, and there's some guys who are sitting there selling solar off of their solar panels. For a little bit of money, you can charge your phone. That's about a year ago. That was not there 3 years ago, and something has changed in the world, as Jacqueline said. It's more connected. People are increasingly demanding access to information, but not just information in, access to opportunity to do something. This is UNICEF. It's really big. Here's the short note on it. UNICEF is an organization that's built like this. It's a triangle. It was built 69 years ago, and it was built for a very different world. But UNICEF is also an organization that's always changed. And as we see that the world is changing and teetering and becoming a little bit more like this, the organization is changing once again. Some of the models that we see as most effective in making change in the world of 2015 and looking forward are models that come from other fields. And so, as we look to how do we solve a problem of a connected world, whether it's something like education, which is broken everywhere, we're not teaching kids the right stuff. We're not teaching them the skills to prepare them for the future. And even in places with very progressive education systems, there's almost no way that we as humans can catch up to the change of pace of technology. We just don't know what to do. We've broken the environment. Today was great. I woke up, it was sunny in Finland. In November, beautiful. We've done a fantastic job of destroying our planet. Humans are an exceptional species. Thumbs up. These are big problems. These are problems that affect all of us. They're not problems that only affect somebody far away in Moroto. So we look to these new models and we try to see how can we connect the new things that are coming with some of these problems that we didn't make. This is our team in New York. They're a bunch of nerds. They're awesome. These are some of the best people I've ever worked with. They come from private sector, from startup, from design. They're engineers. They're people who could work anywhere. And they work with us because we work with big problems, and that's exciting. And we've built some big solutions over the last few years, and I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but some of the things, for example, in Nigeria, a system that we built with young Nigerian entrepreneurs reports on every birth in real time with a text message. Fantastic. That system has recorded about 19 million births to date. And that means that the government of Nigeria can have information in real time about who's being born. That's amazing. That doesn't exist in the US. These systems are very powerful, and by taking approaches and ideas from private sector, we're able to build things that scale. But I want to tell one quick story, because I think it highlights how these types of investments in very local people, local entrepreneurs and local startups can create global change for all of us. And I'm burying the lead here. The lead of this story is UNICEF just launched a VC fund, about $10 million, to make small investments like this. But that's not the important part of my presentation. This was a year ago. So exactly 1 year ago to the day I left Liberia. For the month before that, I was there with our team. We had 3 of us in Liberia for a month during the height of the Ebola crisis. What we got when we were coming in was a piece of paper that says if you're bleeding from your nose or mouth, there's probably something wrong. So that's scary. And we got a thermometer so that we could take our temperature. Also scary. We didn't know a whole lot about the disease. Nobody did. This is a newspaper in Monrovia. There's a guy who gets one of the 7 copies of the New York Times every day, and he writes the headlines up on a board. And when you're walking to work, you can look at that and you can see what's happening in the world. This is the baud rate of the country. This is the kilobytes per day. This is 1 KB per day, maybe. This is not fast information, and you can't use this to make decisions. You can't use this speed of information to understand something that's evolving as quickly as Ebola. This is West Point. This is a poor area in Monrovia that has about 2 major roads coming into it. The week before we got there, West Point was hit by a particularly devastating outbreak of Ebola, and those roads were closed. This whole area was in quarantine. People could not leave. They couldn't get in, and everybody was terrified. There was no information. You were at 0 KB per day. But it's pretty. This is the Emergency Operations Center in Monrovia. This is a group of people from various UN agencies, from the government, from all of the different ministries, trying frantically to figure out what's happening in this emergency. And every day, every meeting looked like this. It was full. I've never been in an emergency where I saw so much collaboration and so much hard work. But we didn't have information. We didn't know what was going on. But these guys did. Everybody in the blue shirts were from a small youth group that would go around actually from, whoa, those are my nerds. No nerds yet. We're going to show you the nerds in a minute. These guys in the blue shirts would go around West Point, and they would actually ask questions, get information from people while that quarantine was happening. So these are 15, 16-year-olds who were gathering information and able to feed that into us and into our emergency response. But they were doing it on paper, which is super slow. It's not fast enough. You can't get the information you need if you're writing it down with a pen on paper. And so we said to them, we're like, what do you guys need? How can we help you get information more quickly that can help us fight this disease? And this was about 2 weeks ago, a year ago. This is Stuart and Evan. We were all there for about a month, and these guys worked tirelessly. Why is this? That just wants to finish. That's somebody rushing me, by the way. That's what happens when your slides start going fast. Stuart and Evan were with us, and also Priscilla, working on how we could build a system that would help these young problem solvers get information more quickly. We went to West Point one day, and we walked around with our user testers. We said, what if we could give you a way to text in information, kind of like we do in Nigeria, and move that information up to the government so they could act more quickly? Would that help you do your job better? And these young people said, yes, but we want to test it. We want to ask questions that are important to us. And we said, what does that mean? UNICEF wants to ask about burying dead bodies and washing the dead. That's what's important to us. And they said, we're kids. We don't wash dead bodies. That's something for old people. That's like what our grandparents do. And I said, well, okay, but how has the Ebola crisis affected you then, young people? What's it changed? And this girl says to me, she's like, well, it's my boyfriend. I can't get a new boyfriend. I'm stuck with the old one. And I was like, what? She said, well, your old boyfriend, you've had him from before Ebola. He's safe. That one's fine. If you get a new boyfriend, he might be sick, and so I'm stuck with this really boring dude. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's what young people want to talk about, of course. So how do we build questions and discussions that are useful to them? And you can't do that from outside. You can't invest in things from outside. It's very, very hard to figure out what's right. And so we look at that infrastructure of UNICEF as an enormous investment mechanism that allows us to be very local when we're making our choices. So we worked with these young people, and we built a system called UReport in Liberia. Now, UReport globally has about 1.7 million users. It's in 17 countries. And it lets you use a text message to access the internet, basically. It's free, it's a service. But we built it with them, and so they were asking questions. This was our user testing day. User testers get very grumpy when you don't feed them, and when it's like 38 degrees and super humid. But as we were walking around, we saw all these informal schools. This is a school that had been set up even though the government had shut down the education system. People are so hungry to learn because learning is connectivity, and learning is access to options. So as we went around with our user testers, we also saw all of this incredible stuff happening in West Point, which you didn't see on the news, because all you saw on the news was like, Liberia is burning, everybody's going to die. Right? This was during the height of a political campaign in the US as well. The first set of questions that we asked was a very small user test. We asked about 3,000 people. And what we did is we asked them exactly the question that the young people had written with us. And it was, what bothers you the most about Ebola? No touching, no ballin', right? I can't write this. If I write this, it sounds like a really old person writing it. The thing that came back, and it comes back in minutes, not in days or weeks or months, was that lack of school was the thing that bothered our constituency the most. And we were able to take that to the government and use it to help look at reopening schools. But let's fast forward a year. So this is now. This is last week. We've got 62,000 UReporters who we can ask a question over a text, and they can write back. And we'd started hearing a few weeks ago that there were a lot of incidences of sex for grades in schools, that teachers were asking for sex in order to give final grades to students. And we were hearing about this being a problem. So we asked a question, is this happening in your school? And what we heard back, and it's in minutes, from 20%, we had a 20% response rate on that. What we heard from 20% of these kids was that absolutely yes, in their area, there was, whoa, that's the wrong slide, there was sex for grades in their school, from 20%. So that's about 16,000 kids who are writing back and telling us that. 83% of them said yes, in minutes. And that means that we as UNICEF can do our job. And our job is to work with governments, to work with big systems. And so what we did is we sent out a phone number. There was a hotline. We're like, here's a hotline. You can call this phone number up, and the government, somebody will talk to you. That hotline went down in a minute, because suddenly 16,000 people are calling a phone number. It doesn't work very well. We set up another 9. All of those went down. And this is all 9 days ago, 10 days ago. Now we're working with the government to set up both legislation to look at this issue, but also a special response task force. And that's happened in 7 days. So think about that. That's a solution for Liberia. But imagine having that kind of access to decision-making information about your school. When you're trying in Finland to figure out what kids want to learn, if you could ask them questions all at once. If you're looking in Chile at what young people want to talk about in issues in the new constitution, you can ask them questions at once. I'm not going to show you that one. That's a secret slide. You have to ask me about that later. But this is all connected to options, to creating options for yourself and for the people around you. If you just give access to information, if you just create systems that are like, here's some information that we have, you can have it, it doesn't give you a pathway to change. This is Lucy. I met Lucy in Maroto. Remember where this story started. I met her a little bit outside of where that water point was. And Lucy is sitting in the dirt by the side of the road, and she's panning for gold. She's trying to get gold out of the mud. And Lucy's naked. Lucy's about 16 years old. She doesn't have anything on, no top on. She's wearing some shorts. And we stopped and started talking to Lucy. And Lucy said, I'm looking for gold. She spoke English. She spoke a little Kiswahili. She'd gone to school. She'd actually gone to several years of school. And we said, what does gold look like? And she said, it looks like seashells. So there's a girl who's sitting by the side of the road naked, panning for gold, which gets you about $4 to $10 a month. That's your amount of money. And she knows what seashells are. She's gone through enough education to get that information, but she has no options. And because she had no ability to even look towards jobs, she's by the side of the road. And this isn't just a story about somebody in Maroto in eastern Uganda. It's a story about a world where populations are growing in very different ways now than they were historically. If you look at the next 15 years of population growth, it's predominantly in places that don't have the developed infrastructure to provide access to options. And I would argue that all over the world, we're not creating the right set of futures for people. But if you look at the numbers and where we most need to invest, because that's where the great innovations are coming from, it's not the traditional places of investment. And that's why our fund and Acumen look at these emerging markets as real areas of possibility. But people aren't staying in their markets. That's the problem. Right now, you've got 59 million people who are moving, not of their own choice. And that's terrifying, right? Suddenly, Ebola has made us realize that the world is global. An epidemic can affect us all. It doesn't just stay in West Africa. And suddenly, refugees have made us understand that, wow, people actually want stability, comfort, happiness, the same things around the world. The world's connected. This was in Zaatari camp in Jordan when I was there last year. These were 2 young kids who had hacked the UNICEF system. We built a system to provide lighting to latrines, and these 2 kids had hacked the electrical system and were powering their PlayStation off of it when I got there. And I was like, guys, put that back. So they were a little bit panicked. But it's not a story just about West Africa or about Lebanon or Jordan. This is my great-grandmother. I found this last Christmas, and I haven't shown this to anybody, so this is the first time I've talked about this. But this is my great-grandmother's UN Displaced Persons card from Germany. And this is from an organization that became the UNHCR. And you'll notice she couldn't sign her name, so she just wrote little crosses on it. That's my grandfather's card from the camp that they were in. It was a refugee camp, and he was qualified to be a policeman, although there were 2 days where he was put in a little, I guess like a holding pen, because he was making vodka for the Americans and selling it illegally, and they didn't like that. But that was his working card. And that was my grandmother when she came to the US in the early 1950s, about 19 years old with 2 kids. And this is what they got. And I thought this was very interesting. This is the type of card that you would get in a refugee camp in Europe about 55 years ago. So it says you can have a few socks, a shoe, a blanket. You see the same thing today. The idea of movement isn't new, but the way that we can talk about people and give access to options is. We're suddenly faster than a paper card. We have options that are much quicker than a check mark or a shoe. So that's my mom in the US after she had moved there. She'd gone to high school for a little bit, and this is the very embarrassing picture of her in national dress somewhere in Minnesota. The family was offered 2 choices, Florida or Minnesota, and if you don't speak English, you have no idea the difference between the 2. One of them is very, very cold. One of them is warm and beautiful. They, of course, picked the cold, freezing one. But this is a refugee. And that's my mom about 50 years later. This is in UNICEF's lobby 6 months ago. And she's on one of our robots. She's on our telepresence robot. She's driving it around. And she's looking at a box. And this box is built in Uganda in our innovation lab. It's a project that we've invested a bunch of money in. It's open source hardware. It runs the software that powers Khan Academy. It's basically running KA Lite on it. And it's built by local entrepreneurs in Uganda. It's something that's built for places like the place where we saw Lucy, but it's not built in the US and shipped there. It's built there with young talent. And that's the kind of investment that we like to make when we're looking at our fund, because these problems, lack of options, lack of opportunity, and lack of information, don't get solved if you solve them in one place. They get solved by looking at the spin of the Earth and how quickly it's shaping itself right now. The team that we work with is incredible. There's some of them here in the audience. I invite you to hunt down a UNICEF innovation person and talk to them, because they can give you a lot more sort of stories about what we're doing and information about what we're doing than I can. Thank you so much for listening today.